My name is Josie Winterfeld, and I want to welcome you this evening to this Treaty as Sacred Covenant event planned by the Truth and Reconciliation Working Group of Mennonite Church, Eastern Canada. I know that many of you are from MCEC congregations. I also know there are people from a number of other church denominations, as well as people coming from Indigenous communities, and as we heard earlier on, people from across this land. And so wherever you are coming from tonight, we want to let you know that you are very welcome here, and we are glad that you have chosen to share this evening with us. I want to let you know that we are recording this evening, which means we can look back on it a little later, but also if you do not wish to be recorded, you can turn your videos off down at the bottom of your window. And if you choose to, you could also remove your name from your profile. If you click on the three dots close to your name, you can either remove your name or edit your name as you wish. We want to begin this evening by acknowledging the land. And of course, we are coming from so very many different places. So I want to invite each one of you to think on the land and honor the land on which you stand tonight. And in your way to honor the original peoples of that land. If you know the traditional territories or the treaty lands that you are from, and we would welcome you to share that in the chat with all the rest of us. And if you don't know the traditional territories you are from or the original peoples of your land, I would encourage you to consider learning more. And I believe that someone is going to put a link in the chat that is a resource that is one way to explore the native lands on which we are on. There are several of us here tonight, including Myeengun Henry and myself, who are living and working in Kitchener-Waterloo. And we are on the Haldimand Tract, which runs 6 miles on either side of the Grand River from the source to the mouth. And this is land that in 1784 was given to the Haudenosaunee peoples of the 6 nations of the Grand River. Even before that, this land was the traditional lands of the Neutral, the Anishinaabe, as well as the Haudenosaunee peoples. For time immemorial, these nations walked gently on this land that is so central to their way of life, their teachings, and their ceremonies. And so we honor these peoples, and we honor all the original peoples from across this land tonight. We honor the land itself, the plants and animals, the water and the air. And we honor the many treaties made across this land, including the dish with one spoon and the 2 row wampum treaties that we'll learn more about later tonight. We want to acknowledge that we have not always honored these treaties in the way that they were originally intended. And we are mindful that these wrongs need to be redressed with the first peoples of this land. As we live and work and play on these traditional lands, may we do so in a good way, in peace and respect and friendship. And may we together work towards reconciliation and healing for all the peoples on this land. This evening is the first of a 7-month speaker series and on sacred covenant, as treaty as sacred covenant. And we'll be exploring covenants made, covenants broken, and covenants renewed. It is our hope that this series and the conversations that happen here can help to illuminate paths forward in living in a more just way with all the nations of this land. So thank you to each one of you for stepping out on this journey with us. I look forward to seeing where it takes all of us. Before we go further, I want to introduce you to some of the people helping make this evening possible. We are grateful to Mennonite Church Eastern Canada for hosting us tonight, and specifically to Lisa Williams, who is our technical host for this evening. If you have any technical troubles, if you have any Zoom troubles, she would be you can be in contact with Lisa, and you could phone and chat with her, and her phone number has been put into the chat here, excuse me, so that you know how to get a hold of her if you're having any troubles. I also want to introduce you to Steve Heinrichs. Steve Heinrichs, can you say hello and give a wave?
I can say hello. Great to be with you all.
And it's good to have you with us, Steve. Steve is from Mennonite Church Canada. He's also part of the Truth and Reconciliation Working Group with MCEC. And Steve is our chat moderator for tonight. We want to welcome all of you, to use the chat function to share any comments or ask questions, and to engage in loving and respectful conversations with each other. If you have any questions for Myeengun Henry or for any of us, you can share those in the chat function, and then later in the evening during our question and answer period, Steve will help bring those forward before us. I also want to introduce you to Mim Harder. Mim comes from both settler and Indigenous roots, and she has been given the name of Wingash-Ikwe by several Indigenous elders, which means sweetgrass woman. Mim works with the Mennonite Central Committee Indigenous Neighbors Program. She also acts as a grandmother and lead facilitator for the blanket exercise with Kairos and Willow Grove Camp. And we're so glad to have Mim with us, and so glad that she has agreed to open and close all of our sessions in prayer, and also offered to be an emotional support. So Please feel free to reach out to Min for conversation if you would find that helpful. You can do so via private chat message or by phone, and once again, her number is being put in the chat function, so you know how to get a hold of her. So, Mim, I want to invite you now to bring our hearts and minds into a good place with an opening prayer.
Wait, Josie. I've been thinking about what prayer I was going to use tonight, because there's an Anishinaabe for directions prayer that I like, but there's also the Thanksgiving address, which is Haudenosaunee based. Knowing that my roots are in the Haudenosaunee area, it is a prayer that's very close to my heart. Also, during these different times that we're in, this prayer just brings us back to an awareness that we don't walk on this earth alone, that there are other beings and people and what we call animals that walk with us. So I ask you to just think about each of these as I speak about them. We direct our attention to the life forces on Mother Earth, to the waters which quench our thirst and provide for the well-being and the strength of plant life, to the animals who provide us with food, clothing, shelter, and beauty, to the trees of all shapes and sizes who provide us with shelter and fruit of many varieties, to the medicine plants who are carrying on the Creator's instructions to cure diseases and sickness. We also give thanks for those who know how to use those medicine plants. We give our thanksgiving to all of these life forces who have continued to follow the Creator's instructions. For this, we are grateful and we thank you. We direct our attention to the four winds. We listen and hear their voices, and we give greetings and thanks that they are still following the instructions given by Creator, sometimes bringing rain and renewing the waters upon Mother Earth and carrying seeds to the earth for new growth in the spring. For this, we give much gratitude and we give thanks. We direct our attention to the work of our elder brother, the sun. As the sun is seen in our sky from dawn to dusk, we know that it is following the instructions of the Creator by providing heat, light, energy, and a source of life for all living creatures of this earth. For these things, we are grateful and we give thanks. We direct our attention to our grandmother, the moon. In our world, our grandmother moon lights the nighttime sky and coordinates the life cycle of all living things so that life will continue on this earth. For following the instructions of the Creator, we give thanks to Grandmother Moon and extend our most thoughtful thanks. We now direct our attention to the nighttime sky, which is full of stars and other celestial bodies who assist our Grandmother the Moon and the Sun in carrying out the Creator's instructions. We are thankful for the way in which those celestial bodies aid us in finding our way about the earth when we travel to other villages or even a great distance. We are grateful that as in ancient parts of creation, they are still following the instructions of the Creator, and for this, we are grateful and thankful. We acknowledge all the bird life from the other animal life, from the smallest insect to the largest animal. We believe that all of life has purpose within creation, and we are thankful that they continue to follow the instructions of the Creator. And for this, we too are thankful. We now turn our thoughts to our Creator, and we choose our finest words and thoughts to offer greetings and thanksgiving. We are grateful that the Creator has prepared all things on Mother Earth and within the universe to have a purpose and a meaning. We are grateful that we as human beings are part of this creation. We are thankful that each element of creation continues to follow the instructions of the Creator for all time and for all of creation. For this, we ever are grateful and are of one mind. And when we give thanks to you, our Creator, With this, we end our words. Our minds are one, all my relations.
Thank you, Min, for starting us off in a good way with those words. It is my pleasure now to be able to introduce you to our speaker, storyteller, and teacher, Elder Myeengun Henry. Myeengun is the former chief of the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation. Myeengun teaches at Conestoga College and is the director of Bidabin Gamik and Indigenous services there. And he's also an elder and teacher at the McMaster University and holds many other advisory roles in many different places. I got to know Myeengun best when a group of us walked from Kitchener to Ottawa in support of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And Myeengun began our journey with a beautiful pipe ceremony and met us along the way several times, blessing us with prayer and encouragement. Myeengun is a wonderful storyteller and teacher, and above all, he is a beautiful human being with a wonderfully generous spirit. And so we are so delighted, Myeengun, to welcome you here tonight. And I want to turn the evening over to you at this point. I believe you are still muted, Myeengun. Can you unmute yourself?
There, is that a little better?
A lot better, thank you.
Okay. Welcome everybody. You can't see this as much as I'm going to show you. I have our medicine going tonight, which is our sage, and I have it lit up. And for those of you who have smudged before, I'd like to offer you a virtual smudge. You can just take it and rub yourself with the medicines that Creator gave us. And this medicine, what we call Mashkodewish, is the one that helps me understand the things that I need to know and to help other people understand through this medicine that our elders carried with them. It's the sage that represents the elder's hair. When you look at it, elder's hair, it's gray. And it's a stronger medicine because sometimes when our elders are getting to that stage where it is almost time to move from this world to Creator's world, sometimes those teachings need to be kind of strong. And so the medicine cares for all those things and gives us a chance to recognize who we are, what we are, and the love that the medicine provides for all of us. So I come from Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, just near London, Ontario. As in the introduction, do work at Conestoga College and work in a capacity of teaching and to be able to provide students with assistance trying to get through their educational journey. But realistically, what happens in my life comes together as a teaching that took place right from the start, even before I was born. The things that I was taught later in life became very important to, I guess, what we're here tonight to talk about, a very part of our history. And I have to be very honest tonight, it just doesn't give us the amount of time to talk in depth about what is really important in this. So I'll kind of go through it at a pretty fast pace just because of our time restraints that we have. But I'm honored to be here tonight and working with Mennonite Church, Sterling Mennonite Church over the years, it's been a tremendous comfort to me to know that there are people that want to know and I think are very serious about reconciliation with Indigenous people throughout this country. And by the acts that I've seen, I find myself in a position of similarity, of love for humankind, for people who understand how other people felt and maybe went through the hardships, and we need to find that balance so that we can start living in this world unified the way our Creator wants us all to be. So I'm going to take us through a little bit of a history. I did this a couple nights ago, so I'm kind of really fresh at the things that I want to present tonight with you. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about might not be as comfortable for people because it really wasn't a comfortable history for the original people of this land. We have to get through a period of understanding. One of the problems I think that exists in today's world is the separation of the true knowledge that made Canada what it is today. But what's not taught in the schools and how things are hidden from our past, we need to bring that to the forefront sometimes just so that we can get that grounding of that understanding, but not to stay there, but to look forward to a time when reconciliation can be achieved in this country from all members of this great nations that live on this beautiful land. And we can start seeing the wisdom, the journey together that'll give us the long life that I think our Creator wanted us to be. But let's go to this portion of this conversation tonight. And I titled it looking back at times of over 500 years of relationship that has, for the most part, swung from a very comfortable, a bit nourishing partnership to a paternalism sense over the original people of this land, and the assimilation process that took place and still is in many cases here in this country. I wanted to make sure that that was understood, that in a nutshell, that's the lineage of this partnership turned to that paternalistic approach by governments that came in to be. Canada must now act at a fair and lasting terms to coexist with the original people of this land. And this has been done in a study through many over the years. One in particular where I've read over was the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People that was done to see from the Indigenous point of view their thoughts and their feelings about how they live now, what they came to know in their history, and what we can do to improve things. And this was recorded a number of years ago as the result of a problem that existed on lands that was going to be used as a golf course over the bodies of Indigenous people, and the Indigenous people of the community chose for that not to happen. Turned into what you've probably come to know as the Oka incident. And when that took place, there needed to be an understanding, and the government of the day decided to hire a very fine gentleman named George Erasmus, who headed this report and traveled to over 640 First Nations in Canada to hear their story. And it came into a volume set, a huge 5-volume set that very eloquently talked about the elders wanted to know and what they wanted to hear and where they want to go. So I took a lot of my research through this journey that was so important to the differences of how our history was recorded and how our future will ultimately be. But I want to say that what you've heard in history and very clearly throughout the years, we call it the ghost of our history here in Canada. The ghost is what breeds the confrontations you're seeing today, the problems that we've seen over in time and time again, when Indigenous people get to a point where their backs are to the wall, then they decide that there's no other course but confrontation. What we see in the news and when we see these incidents, we don't always look back far enough to see why and how they started. So the ghost of our history needs to be brought forward to all Canadians in this country so that we can understand that we only choose this path when we reach an end of negotiation, of the hurt and pain that our elders had to live through residential schools and through the hardship of poverty, racism, and all those things that create poverty for our nations. So we get to that point, and confrontation is the next step. But that is something that's been in the history of all people over the years, when differences of opinion came to be. This beautiful country, came together as a partnership with the newcomers that came to this land. It was, and I always tell people, the thought that Indigenous people were, ready and confrontational with the newcomers that came here. I know very clearly now, by sitting with elders and going through ceremonies, that our people were actually willing to assist the people that came here. And they were sick and they did not know the lands that they were coming to. They needed help, and our people were front runners. We were the ones who aided them and gave them shelter and food and medicine. And during that time, we realized that there was a nation of people that lived in other parts of the world that had different technologies and different understandings and religions and educational thoughts and goals. And we needed to come together to understand these together. And that's how our first relationship started. It's this opportunity to learn and to share some of the technologies that was needed on both sides. So the ghost of our history talks about these things. It turned into a very hardship for the Indigenous people of this land over the thought that there was a document called the Doctrine of Discovery, and their theory came out of a idea that terra nullius, which means land not being used, could be used by anybody. And I think when I look at this theory, Indigenous people never not used their land. They used it in the way that it was meant to be kept pristine. Even though we didn't sit on that property in that land, it was still used during the time of our prayers and our journeys. And we kept it that way so that our animals could survive and our plants could survive. But the theory that came over was the total opposite, that land had to be designated. And if it wasn't, then it was not being used in the proper manner. And this is where our confrontations began, because the act of displacing Indigenous people from their land was brought forward by the settlers that said that we needed land for our settlers and we needed land for people to build their homes and their houses and farms. And the Indigenous people at some point were moving forward, getting in the way of that theory. So I really needed to emphasize that we never alluded to displacing ourselves over the fact that this land was uninhabitable. It was something that we've always had to use and shared, even with the newcomers that came. So I think there's a element of reason that the ghost of our history brought about dishonored treaties. It brought about the theft of Indigenous lands, suppression of our people, poverty, and one of the most dangerous elements of this time period was the abduction of our children. The rise of the residential school system to educate Indigenous people and to civilize them into a way that they thought was better for our people. This is, when I look at the 4 stages of a relationship, we think that there's a better understanding that needs to has to happen here. Both lived in separate, different countries. First contact was fragile, but they were about peace and friendship. The third part was the power tilted to the non-Aboriginal people, and their governments moved Aboriginal people off their land and tried to civilize them through various ways, and to teach the Indigenous people about the ways that they knew, their religion, their culture, and the things that they felt was more important. The fourth stage is the present stage that we're in, time of recovery, reconciliation, but being critical about our history and our relationships so that we can have the truth being spoken about how things need to go, and build a time for renewal, renegotiation of our living standards together here in Turtle Island. I wanted to mention that this time of treaty making that came forward came from a understanding that treaties can only be delivered from one nation to another. So during the time of treaty making, which was necessary for the settlers because they needed to have alliances with the Indigenous people for the land, for allyship in the wars that was taking place. They needed Indigenous knowledge of the land so that they can succeed with their goals. And we participated in many of these cultures coming in and became allies with the French and the British during their time here. And some nations sided with some nations sided with the other. But to protect our treaty rights and to be able to know that the Indigenous people's way of life needed to be protected, many of our leaders stood up and decided that there was time for Indigenous people to come together. One in particular I want to bring to your attention was a very important person in our history. His name is Pontiac. He was a very eloquent speaker that when the British took over the French, he was the one who brought 500 warriors and chiefs together near Fort Detroit and told the Indigenous people that we needed to fight for the rights that we had made with the French, where there was acts of gift giving, where we shared technical obstacles that was necessary for our living standard at the time. And he realized that the British, when they came, wanted to cease all activity which related to the friendship that was coordinated at the start. And then because we weren't as needed, they decided to alienate us from their needs. And really, maybe that's the time we became the problem by protecting our land and by keeping our ancestral territory as pristine as possible. And Pontiac said that we needed to build ourselves up as nations with different languages, different understandings sometimes, but to come together as the original inhabitants of this land to protect our way of living. He was really crucial to keeping the lifestyle that we chose and had lived to be as strong as it can be during those times. So I'd like to honor this guy that probably was the stone-setting procedure for future treaties to come. You've probably heard of a nation-to-nation relationship that exists within treaties, and with the Indigenous people, a nation-to-nation relationship is still sought for all Indigenous peoples of this land even today. But they all come from a mutual curiosity and appreciation of each other. The exchange of goods, the barter and trade. And during that time, there was intermarriage between the Indigenous families and the settlers that came. There was a military and trade alliance that created the bonds that was necessary during those days. But those things changed, and the doctrine of discovery kept popping up in the minds that there was more to this land for the settlers, and we became the problem because of how they seen us separating ourselves from the ideologies that was coming to plague us. Some of those things were very important that we needed to discuss with them. So when we came to that time of treaty making, we decided that there was, I guess, an agreement how we can cooperate by everybody doing the best that they can but I needed to talk about that a little bit more than how it was understood even in those days, because the treaty making idea from the settlers that came really didn't have the same understanding that the Indigenous people thought a treaty would ultimately become or should be during that time. Our people were always very, very spiritual in knowing that our Manitous, our Gitche Manitou was looking after us, and we needed to address him during these times that was crucial to big decisions from our people. So our people always knew that through ceremony, it became even more of an obligation for us to protect the land. And so when the treaties were signed during the 1600s, there was differences of understanding later that came to be. When the Indigenous people were signing these treaties, they thought that there was nothing that can change the fact that we were Indigenous sovereign nations coming together, and a treaty can't change that. A treaty can tell us that there is agreements that we would have over land and over standards of living. But when we came together and offered our understanding of those treaties, we used our ceremonies like the pipe ceremony. The pipe ceremony is using tobacco, and our tobacco is one of the first medicines that we were told when we came to this world to use it when we want to talk to our Creator. We were asked to take this tobacco, and when a hard decision had to be made, to offer that prayer to our tobacco or to our Creator through the tobacco. So we would light it in our pipe, and we would talk to each other about how we understand this relationship to be, this agreement that we're talking about, in particular, any of the treaties that they had. It would have been discussed that it's not about the separation of our rights as people. It's more of our responsibility to keep sacred the beautiful land that Creator put us on. And every treaty that we had signed during those times came with an element of spirituality. The Indigenous people brought their elders together. They talked about how lighting the pipe in both parties, smoking that pipe, would tell our Creator that our goal together through this ceremony would be that we will acknowledge this beautiful land, and we will live together similar to what you are probably aware of in the Turo Wampum. Living together, those people sharing land that will never allow one person to jump into the other boat, and vice versa, to live on this land with love, peace, and respect, and be able to live in this world land, protecting our beautiful mother, the earth, and sharing the resources that we're here for everybody. So one of the original ones in 1613 talked about that very clearly. I want to move ahead a little bit to that treaty that led to a very important treaty that you might have heard about. And our relationship with understanding always came in the form of stories about being open to things, but writing things in a fashion that kept things in your visual concept of what that relationship was going to be, or that agreement was. So our people from many, many years back, even between our own nations, had told our story through wampum belts. Our wampum belt teachings keep the story very fluid and alive because there's no words put on those wampum belts. A lot of them are what we would consider art today, but it was more than art to us. It was the story that came from our hearts. And we needed to put those stories on a place where everybody, even from different languages, will not have any differences of opinion of what that agreement was. So the wampum belts were created out of very sacred items that we had in this continent. And the shells that we used to make the beads were very hard to make. But once we put these together, it showed how important and how much time and effort these agreements need to be by virtue of those building the wampum belts. I wanted to bring this one to you, which has probably been brought to your attention a few times. 1763, there was a time when two nations, one from over the waters, decided that there needed to be some acknowledgement of the treatment of Indigenous peoples here with the settlers. During this time, the rules were put into place of how we're going to deal with Indigenous people and lands. And King George also said that there was an important element of relationship that needed to be honored. And so in the Royal Proclamation of 1763, we heard what that was, and that only lands could be transferred through the Indigenous understanding with the government of the day. And we had to honor those treaties and to be honorably that nobody is stealing from the other one, that things are done in a coordinated fashion. So that was kind of put together in the Royal Proclamation. But the year later, 1764, as you see on this belt, talked about something even more important. The ratification of that agreement came through not necessarily the Royal Proclamation itself, but the Treaty of Niagara, which is this belt here. This is the one that we came together to talk about that agreement. And this belt was actually brought in from Sir William, the superintendent of the day. He had this belt made. He was married to a Haudenosaunee woman who probably helped him understand the importance of the wampum belts, and he learned that these wampum belts were something that was of sacredness to to Native people, and we would tell our stories this way. So this belt was built and presented to us. I just wanted to quickly say that this is the two people that came together talking about this chain, this covenant chain, this relationship was meant to be very strong. It was meant to be stronger than your handshake. It was meant to be stronger than any other metals that would, because chain, handshakes and rope will break a lot easier than metal. And metal was meant to be a part of this strength of this understanding. So when we brought these bowls together, these dishes, I needed to bring this one out to you. Oh, we don't have this one, but the dish with one spoon has these triangles on them, and when you look at them, they represent those metals that come through. The 1764 was the time of ratification. There was 24 nations that came from the Eastern Confederacy and the Western Confederacy. 12 and 12, they called it, that put together this belt here of understanding of these treaties. The 12 Western Confederacy and 12 Eastern Confederacy met and solidified what was said during the Royal Proclamation belt. This one was told to us that the belt here was the boat that was to bring the necessary items to make this treaty established properly. We were told that this boat should never be empty. It would be filled with the needs of the Indigenous people of the day, so that we can always bring these together and provide that. The Indigenous people on the other side were Mother Earth, our Turtle Island here. Our foot was on there saying that we are going to protect this earth forever and ever. If those gifts were not recognized and honored, what we can do is we can pull everybody together. One person would pull one side and they could feel it all the way across these 24 nations that came together, that there's something needed to be discussed. Maybe they didn't live up to that responsibility in that treaty, and so all they had to do was move their arm, and they all felt that. And so it was so important for us to know that there was alliances and friendships that allowed us to build these treaties together hand by hand, and that we can always have this relationship with the newcomers that came here. So we understand that there was two of these that came. They were given to the Odawa people on Manitoulin Island, and the other one was given to the Haudenosaunee people. Only one is found today. The Odawa still have the belt, but we haven't found the other one yet. But the story is still alive and true. I needed to bring that to you because in this time of understanding, there was the covenant chain, the silver, they said will sometimes rust, and we need to come and polish these belts. And what that meant was that we need to come together and shine these up every year so that we don't forget the intent and the purpose of these belts and the sacred ceremonies that went when we decided to ratify these belts through our pipes and our songs and our ceremonies. And so when we come together every year, once a year, we'll bring presents to each other and we'll remind ourselves that this is an honored treaty that is still valid today due to the fringes on here that talk about this being valid as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. And that's how long this treaty by this nation to nation agreement came to be. We all know that times changed. The need for land became more abundant to the settlers, and maybe the alliance of military allyship wasn't as important anymore, so we became what was known as the Indian problem. They kind of said we shouldn't have made these types of agreements because we need this land, and now they're kind of stopping us from settling on lands that was given to the indigenous people to reside on, which was land west of the Allegheny Mountains and over to the Mississippi River, all the way from the bottom to the top, which was called Indian country. And they needed to get, I guess, when the settlers filled the land on the eastern coastways, some of them came through and found what in California was the gold that made them crazy because they really wanted to get that precious metal, and they needed to find a way to get through those lands where they met resistance with people like you might have heard Sitting Bull, Cochise, and many other warriors that wanted them to live up to those treaties. The problem that became settlers was the Indian problem with indigenous people. We needed to get rid of it, get rid of the problem, and that's where the schools came into play. Well, first of all, it was the blankets that was given to our people during at those gift-giving times. The blankets that were as presents to our people were laced with illness such as smallpox. And when our people used those blankets, they contracted these diseases that we had no cure for because it was a disease that came from another part of the world. And our medicines we didn't have medicines for that. Our population reduced. Our elders and our young people and our women had passed away quite rapidly, and we came to a point where they were able to put us on these tracts of land, what we now know as reserves, where I think the intent was to take, almost like cattle, to put us into a corral where we can finally control these people. And I don't think we were dying fast enough. Our people were still here, and so the worst thing that could ever happen came to life, and that was the residential school system coming in and demanding that our children enter these schools and to dislodge themselves of their language, their culture, their ceremonies, and take on what they thought was better for us in their own religions and cultures and way of living. And it was painful because our people didn't know what their children were going to endure, and ultimately it was the killing, the raping, the murder, the nutrition experiments that took place in those schools that devastated our population, our children, and our culture. This is a really hurtful part of our history. We're going to honor those survivors next week on Orange Shirt Day. And if you get a chance to wear an orange shirt, please do so in honor of what took place. But I think this is the reason these stories needed to be told, because they're not nice and they're very hard for us to accept. But some people, if I even look at how during the War of 1812, where the Americans separated and wanted to build their own way of being in fighting the British people, the confrontations of those brought us to a place where we needed to fight back, and we did here in Southern Ontario. The Native people from this region fought those people all the way back to Detroit, or if we didn't do that, they would have actually, we would have been sitting in the United States right now. They fought in, the loyalists they brought for this land to live on this land in Southern Ontario was so that they can continue to fight the Americans that were coming up here. And we in alliance with them stood up against them in the War of 1812, where another visionary, his name is Tecumseh, was killed at that war, but he knew if we didn't stand up at that time, we would have definitely been decimated. The British actually left that fight. They did retreat back to Toronto, and we fought all the way back to Detroit. So the borders that you see today are in due respect of the Indigenous people from Southern Ontario who did that fighting to keep it where it was. And we don't get that recognition in our history. People don't even know that story. And so today we have to tell these stories, the truth about this country, how it came to be, and how important it is for us to build an alliance today to educate and to build this future that's going to live up to those treaties that were talked about earlier. Because treaties, like we said, were never meant to dismember us from our relationship to the land. In our vision, we were told that these treaties were necessary for us to live jointly on this land in a way that didn't infringe on each other's way of living. And I think that's something that we can all understand now, that that was definitely not the case for us. Even today, as a chief of my nation, I've witnessed poverty and anger and hurt that our people have lived through during these times. They're still living the existence of the hurt that residential schools placed on their grandparents and their parents, and moving through generations, never healing those ills and hurts that have gone through generation to generation. Even today, people are still not healed from all those beautiful thoughts that they knew was inside them. But I mean, the healing that needs to be placed was to bring that back for them. And the hurt that was placed on them and their grandparents was, it's still in their hearts, it's still in their minds. So I think this is where we are today with trying to find this, build this relationship together so reconciliation can take its turn, but not have it directed by a single entity like a government. This has to come from the people and the hearts and the history that they understand that their relationship to this land to be. And I think why we feel that it's not acting fast enough, it's because of, well, when I look at the United States and how they portray their history of being warriors and fighters to, you know, conquest the people and earn the right to have that land, that is still in the minds of many people. Like, we won this, you know, our heroic battles, our warriors, you know, fought and died so that we can have these lands. Neglecting that the lands are sacred, our mother, the earth, not a piece of land that is only worth money. So I think we conflict on theory in that manner of what land is all about. We're part of it. When it's our turn to go back to our mother, the earth, we separate our spirit in our physical body and we go back to our mother, the earth, and we become part of Mother Earth. Once again, our spirit goes to Creator's world. It's not land that we said we own that and fought for it just because we can make money off of it and use the resources. This is where we're trying to make this distinction of understanding, and that's why these ceremonies were so important. That's what we were protecting in these ceremonies, and that's why we need to remember that those treaties are still valid today. The sun is still shining, the grass is still growing, and the rivers are still flowing. And that's really what we need to have people talk to your young people about today, those young people in school, those members in churches, the ones who are wanting to know the real truth about how we can coexist, and just go back to those treaties and remember that that's what those treaties were built on. Coexistence, not overburdening and not overtaking another nation. Just like the True Wampum says, we can live side by side and walk on this beautiful Turtle Island together as long as they don't jump in our boat, we don't jump in their boat and take over. But this is where we are today. The fact is, nobody talks about these stories. They don't even teach the Turo Wampum in schools. They don't talk about the Royal Proclamation and what we considered the Treaty of Niagara to be in the 24 Nation Belt, and how many people actually ratified that understanding. So if we can kind of start that process, maybe there's a chance for people to stop going to that point where we have to shut down railroad tracks, occupy places in our parks and lands, that was actually their land to start with. Because now we sit into these situations where Standing Rock told many people, that we were willing to stand up for our battles. Our battle with Line 9, with the pipelines running through our territory without our consent, has deep-rooted meaning that we will fight for the rights of our people, and it's our treaty rights to be able to protect the lands that we call our home and our ancestral territory. I think this gets neglected sometimes in those media outlets that talk about the confrontation more than the history and the reason why it came to that point. And we need to start educating our people from that manner. Our people are still very much spiritual. We believe in the Gitche Manitou, which is our creator. We believe that our point in our being here on this earth travels through that lodge of life, where we come in through that eastern door. We learned the elements of life through our elders and our teaching and our ancestors, through our clans and through our spiritual guides and our helpers. And as we travel through that lodge, when that western door opens and we travel back to our mother, our creator, then we have to remind ourselves, and we, in the eyes of our creator, we have to be honest about the things that we did in this world, whether we are proud of them or not, whether we believed in things and maybe we learned later that it might have been different. Those are the conversations that we'll have with our creator when we travel to that western door. So each of these people who neglected those treaties and neglected Indigenous people and people throughout the world will have to have that conversation with yourself. If you don't, then later with your creator at the time when you pass through that western door. We all will go through this walk of life that we have a decision to make. Every day when you make a decision to walk in a certain direction, whether that has consequences, whether you make a decision that's not very healthy, you still have to answer to that decision. And our history and the people that perpetuated that history will have to answer those to our creator someday. And we, now that are relearning our language, our spiritual journeys as Indigenous people, we're reflecting now back on our own teachings that was taken away. And that's why you're seeing people standing up today even more. They talk about the eighth generation, the eighth fire, which was the time when there was no, I guess, understanding of rationale between the settlers and the Indigenous people, because somebody lost their way. And without that convergence of understanding, we need to make sure that there's a really important time when this can come together. And maybe that's where we're at right now with our people standing up the way they do. But we need to have this opportunity now for us to talk about these things in a comfortable manner, because these topics that I'm talking about tonight brings hurt and anger to many people. A lot of settlers feel this way. They know that they didn't participate in those decisions and what they did with Indigenous people, but they feel the effects of what those ancestors did. And Indigenous people are still feeling that too. So we need to make that opportunity for us to converge once again, have this conversation in a good setting, where we can feel comfortable that our voices will be heard. And I think maybe there's where reconciliation can take a strong step forward by allowing these stories to be told. We have laws in our books today in Canada that still reflect paternalism that we know need to cease. The Indian Act, as the walk to Ottawa talked about, the endorsement of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So important for us to take the elements out of there and make our governments, see clearly that Indigenous people are not just members of this society. We're partners in this government. We're partners in the wealth of these resources. We're partners not under any other being here. We're not just another culture or ethnic group here in this country. We're the original inhabitants of this land. We fought our warriors to keep our ceremonies alive. We have our sweat lodges and our shake tents and our vision quests that is coming back now because people know the importance of this. And when you go to those ceremonies, you awaken inside yourself and your heart, your mind, your body, and your spirit. That is important for us to remember these important teachings that our elders gave us. When you see our elders with their long hair, usually it's braided this way, and the three braids that you see within this is your mind, your body, and your spirit being tied together, so it's unbreakable. You can break your mind, you can break your body, you can break your spirit, but if you tie those together, it's very hard to break. And so we remind ourselves every day when we braid our hair, and we know that we can put ourselves in a stronger place if our minds, our body, and our spirits are tied together. So I remind myself every single day when I braid my hair that I need to do this. I need to do this for our future generations, for our children, for all mankind, so that we can have this opportunity to have these conversations and to be able to be respectful toward one another. So I'm not sure how much time I have left. Maybe if Mim can give me a time, because I wanted to make sure there's some time for questions, and I didn't even get into half of the things that we need to talk about. So what I'd really like to come out of this conversation tonight is more conversation. Maybe if it sparked you, if there was something that I said that maybe even triggered you to think maybe I need to understand that better, or maybe you disagreed, with something. We need to have this conversation so that we can put everything on the table and have a chance to discuss these things in not a confrontational setting, but a respectful setting. Our Seven Grandfather teachings talks about being able to come together and to deal with hard issues. But let's do it together in a comfortable way. Yeah, they might be hard to talk about and they might trigger anger and emotion, but if we are contained and done in ceremony in light of our Creator being there, I think we have the opportunity to face these delicate topics and probably deal with them in a lot better way. But our Creator needs to be there. Our spirit helpers need to be there. Our children and our hearts and our mind and our body have to be there for us to do that. So is there, I guess it could be time for questions now. I'm not sure if that's okay.
I think so. Thank you very much, Myeengun, for your words. You've given us lots to ponder. And like you've said, this is just the beginning of a conversation, and we want that conversation to go on now. So if you have questions for Myeengun, this is a good time to send them to Steve so that he can share them with us. Yeah, Steve, I don't know if you have any now, or are we waiting for some to come in?
I've got lots of questions already.
Okay,
and
lovely.
More starting to fly in. So I thought it might be helpful if I just bundle these up in sets. And so not to overwhelm, I won't share all the questions, but Myeengun, I'll follow your lead. So 2 questions that are quite related are these. You talked about treaties and wampum, and there's a question about how the church should relate to treaties. The question is, should church people see the 2-row, the Treaty of Niagara, as part of their own spiritual heritage, or is that appropriation? And then the second question was, so what would it look like for a church, maybe one that's a next door neighbor to where you live, Myeengun? What would it look like for that church to live into a genuine wampum treaty relationship?
Good questions.
Well, if I can take that question, I really like that question because, like I said earlier, the understanding of treaties was different in the eyes of the settlers and the Indigenous people we can take wampum belts and utilize them today in the avail that they were supposed to be. It's a story that's told in an art form in our wampums. Some people said wampum was money. Well, it wasn't really like currency. It's more important than that. It's our stories that are told, put together in a basically art form, and we can honor those treaties today because it was agreed. I think we need to honor it in the fashion that it was meant to be. We need to have people realize that the government maybe changed their direction on how they looked at those treaties and those wampum belts, but the intent of those treaties were done in those manner. No, there was never no wampum belt that was given to each other without the ceremonial part. So we can remind people that maybe have a different opinion of that they were done in ceremony. They were done with our Creator watching. And you can push that to say today that those treaties that were done in that spiritual manner, ceremonial manner, still exist today. And we can honor them that way, even if we have new treaties today, even if we have new wampum belts, we can still say that they were done in that very important manner above human, our Creator, being there to witness that agreement between humans. So yeah, we could use them, and the sacredness behind the wampum belts has to be told, and we have to start honoring it the way that they were meant to be.
Just to follow up on that, Myeengun, I see that Josie has a 2-row wampum in her office, and I think she's zooming in from church. And I'm pretty sure that Josie has used that wampum, and Sterling Mennonite has used that wampum in the sanctuary in the service to remind them of this is part of their story that they need to continually remember. What do you think? Like, should churches all across these lands have wampum in their sanctuaries? Maybe that's more a question for Josie as well. But so that's a question tied into just a follow up as well on. So what would it look like for a church to really embrace the wampum in your neighborhood on the ground in these kind of relationships? Check.
You know, are you asking Josie that one, or me? Okay. It's a sacred bond. It's something that I think whoever are signers to those treaties have to honor those treaties. And the settlers of the day, with those big wampum teachings and treaties that we have, like the Royal Proclamation and the 2-row, you can't separate the people who made those agreements and the people who lived under those governments. They're all part of that treaty. So our people say we're all treaty people. So we all have a right to use those wampum belts, and we all have a right to teach them in our religious life, in our social life, in our educational life, in our home life. We have to honor these treaties in all capacities because it has a direct relationship to not just in agreement, but our relationship to our land and all the things that make us alive today, because that medicine that grows on the land can't be separated from those agreements. It's all part of it. How we talk to our Creator in church or a ceremony in some capacity, it's the same thing. It's how important it is, and it's how deep these wampum belts need to be brought back to society in all forms.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Myeengun. So 2 more closely related questions that I'll share, and these questions have to do with are in response to your sharing about the relationship with the land and its sacred nature, and even concerns around climate and global warming and such. So here are the 2 questions. One asked, Canadians and Mennonite Church Eastern Canada folks are very concerned with the environment and climate change, and in new ways. We are recent converts to this focus. Given that Indigenous peoples have had this focus much longer, what don't we as readily see from your perspective? What are we missing? or struggling to see? And the second question is, again, just really struck by your understanding of land as sacred in contrast to land as something that can be bought and sold. Myeengun, can you teach us a bit more about what it means when you talk of land as sacred?
Well, the first question on the climate issue, there's no separating what that climate change is talking to us about. It's telling us that we are disrespectful to our mother, the earth, and when we warm our planet up to a point where we're going to see deadly hurricanes and the devastation that's taking place around the world with our weather, that's something that we can control as humans by utilizing things that are more natural to our earth. The oil products that we've been overusing and abusing has definitely given this climate change a push that I think we're seeing devastation. I have friends down in New Orleans who live day to day in I guess fear, of those hurricanes coming and being how they are today, even stronger. Two, in the same Gulf of Mexico, just for the first time ever, talks about, we have a role to play in that. So I think there's no separating the fact that humans have a role in climate change and in the devastation effects that's going on. So I think let's put it in perspective. The land is our mother, and we need to protect her. And if we're doing things with just the economy in mind, then I think it's going to perpetuate climate issues that we're going to face even more and more drastically. One of the prophecies that we understood was the next devastation on the earth will be fire, and the land is getting scarce and scarce with the water levels coming up, where you'll see more fires. And look what's happening out in California right now. The land never seen these types of fires before, and if those prophecies to come true, less land will mean more fires and devastation. I really, this question really gets to me because it takes it right to the heart of really what I got into politics for, is to help people understand our relationship to the environment, and I think we need to really seriously look at that. We've been kind of sideswiped the last couple of years with presidents that like who we have right now, who aren't giving even a thought on climate change. And here in Canada, we talk about it, but we need to start doing more. So, and I kind of forgot the second question, sorry.
I think you answered it, Myeengun. Thank you. That was fantastic. We're going to turn right now to Victoria King, who would like to ask a question, and she would like to share it in person via Zoom. So over to Victoria.
Bonjour, Myeengun. I'm so happy to see you today. It's so nice to meet you, by the way. I'm so happy everyone is here, and Gichimigwech to everyone. I'll try to be I'm not a good speaker in this English language. I struggle to articulate what I'm saying. When I think what happened to us as nations, as people, when the white man first came here, or the immigrants, whatever you want to call them, first came here, I really believe it was an apocalypse. I really believe that as nations, as societies, our entire world's changed, and our lifestyles, our economies, even our neurology, even our I really believe they even affected the way our brain works. How much of an impact impact it was to us as peoples. So that's why I call it that, and that's why I believe that. And another thing I wanted to point out, when I point this out to other Indigenous peoples, the ones who are in agreement with me, if I may, and I wanted to give a shout out to them as well, are the ones known as the Chicanos of Mexico. Whenever I mention this to them and refer to them in that way, they're like same, and they like that. They're in agreement with that. So my question, Myeengun, I don't understand. I don't understand the medicine question. We are in a time of great sickness right now, if I may, Myeengun, if I may, with the COVID, whatever. And tobacco really is powerful, blessing, strong medicine. I can't articulate it, Myeengun, I'm sorry. But because we have tobacco, like, how did non-Indigenous people get this tobacco? Like, in order for me to get tobacco, I have to go to I need to have colonial money, colonial currency, and I have to go to the counter and I have to pay for it from a non-Indigenous person who sadly, more than likely has no meaning of where this tobacco was or where it came from or what it means to us as Indigenous people, how you referred to as a capitalist society. How did the history of tobacco, how did non-Indigenous people get tobacco? How did they get their hands on it? It is said that now, it is said that there's even chemicals in tobacco, and because of this great sickness, COVID-19 pandemic all over the world, shouldn't the protocol be anyway to just share the tobacco? Why not just share the medicines? Like, wouldn't that be the protocol? If I may, whatever. Okay, get you me, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because you talked about how important we understand tobacco to be, and it became a commodity with the newcomers that came here. They demanded the land and how they even use the land for farming purposes. So we knew that tobacco was the element. It was the first thing that we came to when Creator brought us to this world, put us right next to the tobacco plant and told us to use it when we need to talk to Creator. And during like the residential school times, that's when they decided to take everything away from us that we knew to be sacred in that manner. And I think when tobacco was turned into a recreational substance, for cigarettes and cigars and things like that, they dislodged the element of sacredness within what tobacco really was. And you're very right. When we lost our ability to grow our own tobacco, to have our tobacco in abundance because of the necessary need of it, now we have to go to people, non-native farmers, who grow this tobacco in not even the same manner as we recognize it to be, because you did say, like the chemicals they put in tobacco is really for getting you hooked on more tobacco. And now we fight for that struggle to get people to recognize that the tobacco is one of our original medicines. We can't, as a chief of my nation, we had to regulate tobacco. They actually legalized this, made it illegal when it come to places like Akwesasne, who they said were contraband tobacco taken across the borders, and they turned it into a criminal element even in our own communities, where we couldn't trade our tobaccos. We can't even grow them under the Indian Act and sell them off reserve. That's how controlling they had with our own traditional medicines like tobacco and other medicines that we have. So now that it's all coming back and we're understanding how sacred those medicines are, not a law on this earth can stop us from using those tobaccos. We do need to have a place in our life where we have to grow our own medicines or go to the elders and the spiritual people who do that and get those tobaccos in that manner, but not over the counter, not where we are today. So that's what we're fighting for. And that's what those treaties were, that we can maintain our way of life and keep what we figured sacred. So thank you so much for bringing that important element up. And you're right, it was such a changeover in life. We didn't lose it though. Like, however we feel, we've been damaged. Creator gave us this in our memory, and our elders who fought outside of, at the risk of being killed and jailed for practicing their ceremonies, our warriors that did that, they kept it alive. Residential school kids were in school, but our warriors who knew that this ceremony was important went and practiced them, even at the risk of being hurt and killed. So I thank them. and those medicine people that still practice.
Thank you, Myeengun. I think we're
One more thing, Myeengun. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to point out another thing. I'll be as fast as I can. Another thing that I wanted to point out that I get from other non-Indigenous, other Indigenous nations, and I even hear this from non-Indigenous people as well. The discovery of our lands, the discovery of our continents and homelands and territories and custom impacted not just our tribal First Nation history, it impacted world history. It had an impact around the entire globe, like around the whole world. So Myeengun, this is so beautiful. Not enough words can express how grateful I am to you. Thank you so much.
Just real quick on that note, they said that the residential school system was followed up by people like Hitler, or people in South Africa, who looked at how to annihilate a nation. One of the teachings I heard from an elder was they looked at those things and they said that they wanted to mimic those because they knew how to annihilate people they didn't like. So yeah, you're right. It had global effect. The things that happened to us in this country of Canada.
Thank you. I feel like this conversation could go on for a long time. I'm sure there are many unanswered questions out there and so much more conversation that could be had. But I'm also mindful that we said that we would close at 8:30, and I want to honor that for people that need to leave. I am wondering, Myeengun, whether you might be willing to stay for a few minutes afterwards in case there are people that still want to ask a few questions, and so that we can keep going on. I haven't asked Lisa whether that is okay. I'm wondering if Lisa's okay with us taking a few more minutes afterwards after we've released those that need to go. And yes, Lisa says that is fine. So Myeengun, I wonder if you have any last thoughts or comments to us before we close this part of our evening together.
Yeah, just real quickly, I know the time is here, but I just wanted to say thank you for all the listeners that came in, the people who are working really hard to create reconciliation. I want to thank the church for all they do and bringing those wampum belts into the church and talking about these and, doing about what anybody with a good heart would want to do. Walk to Ottawa and tell the government that they need to start doing something different. We might see things in a different way when it comes to spirituality, but it's not really, it's honoring our Creator who gave us the responsibility to be kind and gentle. And I think that's the unifying factor that we can all have, no matter what religion in the world it is. Those teachings that talk about honor, respect, love, friendship, truth, are there in every capacity. Let's put it to work and let's show people and model that it can work. So thanks everybody for participating tonight. If you disagree, please let me know. I'm open to discussion and I'd like to hear your thoughts and visions on some of these topics too. Miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you, Myeengun, for sharing your time with us and for sharing your teachings with us and for sharing the wisdom of your heart and your mind. Thank you so very much. And I think one of the images that will stay with me is the one of the silver covenant chain and the idea of polishing it off, that sometimes that chain of friendship gets tarnished. And oh my goodness, it has gotten very tarnished over the years. And so my hope is that we find ways to polish off that silver covenant chain. And I am grateful for that image to hold as we go forward through the rest of this, as we continue to try to find ways to live into reconciliation and healing for the nations of this land. Myeengun, we will be sharing an honorarium with you. I also have a tobacco tie here for you that I offer you virtually. And as well, we have a small gift. This is a piece of pottery made by a Mennonite potter in St. Jacob's, and it's made for you. And I vision this infusing this cup with our love and our gratitude. And if we were here in person, I would pass it around so each person could touch this. But I hope that this mug can hold for you that love and our appreciation, and that when you drink from it, you can be reminded of all these sacred covenants that we share with one another, and this rich evening of conversation that we have had here together. So thank you so very much. And I will be by your house in the next couple of days to physically deliver this in a safe, socially distanced way. I also want to say thanks to a number of other, thanks to the people who have been working in the background. Steve, thank you. Mim, for opening us and being our emotional support this evening. Thank you to you. I want to say a great deal of thanks to Mennonite Church Canada and Mennonite Church Eastern Canada, both making this series possible. And thank you to Lisa for being our tech guru tonight. And I also wanted to say thank you to the Truth and Reconciliation Working Group, the planning group, and a special shout out to Scott Morton Ninomia, without whose leadership we would not have gotten off the ground tonight. So Scott, a great deal of thanks to you as well. And I want to invite Mim now. And actually, one more question, Lisa, that several people are asking, and I just want to, I'm not sure of the answer for, is how the link to this recording will be shared. I assume that it will be sent out in an email to everyone that is registered, but correct me if I'm wrong about that. And while I wait for that answer, I invite you to close us in a good way with a closing prayer.
I want to honor all the words that have been spoken and put in the chat. I also want to honor all the words that have not been spoken tonight, that are still rolling around your head and their time to come out hasn't happened yet. I'm sure that will. And feel free to reach out to us and we will do our best to answer any questions for you. I want to also offer great gratitude for each of you for coming tonight, for taking time out of, for some people still busy life, some people not quite so much. And as you walk forward on your path, take a moment to really look around you, not just at the two-legged human beings, but all the things that share this earth with us, to really listen to that water and let it wash your soul and wash everything out that's going on in your head, to sit under the tree, or like my granddaughter, running up to the tree and actually getting it a hug. People may think you're a little crazy, but that's okay. You need that as much as the tree does. And look up at the sky. I've noticed the lack of planes and the lack of noise a lot since March. And the other day, my granddaughter, she'll be 3 the end of March. She said, Tota, there's a plane in the sky. We hadn't seen a plane all day, and it's very refreshing to see nature, being comfortable in nature, watching the squirrels, the bold little chipmunks. One ran over my foot the other day, and that hasn't happened in a long time. And just take a moment to really stop and take a deep breath and look at what is around us and truly, truly appreciate what we've been given. I think even though this is a difficult time for a lot of people, I don't like to be negative about it. I think it's a huge pause for many of us, and I think that's a good thing. Because it is bringing us back to our roots. It is bringing us back to earth. The number of people that gardened this year that have either never gardened or haven't gardened in years is amazing. And I think we all need that pause. The earth needs that pause. And we need to appreciate it for what it is and reevaluate where we are. I have great gratitude for Myeengun for tonight, your knowledge, your wisdom. I've heard a lot of it before, but it's always good to hear it again, and it's always good to hear it from a different voice. Walk well, walk strong, and use your voice. We can change this world, one heart and one person at a time. And I have so much gratitude for so many people showing up tonight. May Creator walk with you and give you a great path in the days ahead. And hopefully we'll see you all again in 30 days in October. Chimigwach Noe, may you all be safe and hope to see you virtually again, hopefully someday in person as well, but bless you.
Thank you, Mim, and I echo my thanks to all of you for sharing this evening with us. This ends the formal part of our time together, and we release you if you need to go. If there are any people that want to stay and ask a few more questions or be in conversation with Myeengun or the others of us, please feel free to stay on. So blessings to all of you as you need to leave.
Oh, it says rating that is unstable. Be under the cover or on top or something, huh?
Do any of those that are staying on have some questions?
Why is it unstable?
That are still burning within?
Myeengun, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
I do have a question for you. I was in Montreal a year and a bit back ago and learned about the 1701 peace treaty. And I guess there were like 39 native groups that signed this peace treaty with the French. And are you familiar with it? It's called the
I'd have
Great
to
Peace Treaty or
research that one
something.
again. Yeah.
Are you familiar with it? And what do you make of it? I was struck that the French signed it. I wasn't surprised the British didn't sign it. I'd be interested in your take on that and what you make of it for history, what you make of it for today.
That in particular, I'd have to really, I really haven't looked at it for a while, so I'd have to kind of look at it again and renew myself with it. But if I kind of just look at any of the treaties that we signed, they were all within the same intent. Different people aligned with different people at the time. You got me really curious now. I'm gonna look at that one once again. There's so many, and I just, in my mind, trying to remember them all, but it's impossible. Thank you for bringing it up, though.
Yeah, well, it blew me away when I read about it because it sounded like it sort of carved up all of North America, but it really put the French aligned with the natives in a way that the British weren't. But I knew nothing about it, and I know a fair bit about history, and I was blown away that it even existed. So anyway, it just really surprised me, and I didn't know if it added up to much or if it was just another piece of paper.
Well, I'd have to caution on some people on some of those treaties that they hear about, because yeah, there's probably some really treaties that were done without our really consent. That's happened quite a bit in our history, and they've been talked about in courts today. And, you know, there's a number of them that we never even really heard about before. So I know this one, if it had such a big impact, it probably was ratified, but that, I'm going to look at that again. So thanks for bringing it up.
I had another question that's maybe easier, a little bit more accessible. I spend a lot of time outdoors fishing and, well, mostly fishing, but like this last weekend, I almost got lost fly fishing on a stream that nobody else had been on in a long, long time. How, when you think about loving the land and having a sense about Mother Creator and what that means to the land, do you think that's do you think that's easy to do when people are so disconnected or don't spend much time outdoors, really alone in solitude and seeing what nature is about? It's one thing to have a romantic notion about what the land is about, but if you don't spend any time on it, I'm not sure if we really know what it means to be connected.
You hit it right on, because we used to do our Vision Quest ceremonies in the bush, and what we said, we were spending time with our Manitous, our spirits out there, because that's where they dwell. That's what they know, but we venture into their world. Like when we go fishing, we're out in the bush hunting, we're in their world. We're in the world of our spirits, the animals' world. That's not our world. So we have to make sure that we give our thoughts. We put our tobacco down so that we can actually have an animal come and bite our line, you know, because if you're there for the wrong intent, you won't always get those success stories. It's the way that we interact with our beings other than human in order for us to understand that. Because when we did our 4-day vision quest, we found a place where we thought those Manitous kind of lived. And when we're close to those Manitous, which are spirit and our language, we dwell with them. We get the chance to ask them questions more. So we have to understand that. Like, people hunt and fish for game and recreation today, but it was never meant to be that way. It was only for the purposes, because we're taking a life. And we have to ask for that life, and sometimes that life will give up itself for us to have sustenance. When you catch a deer, you didn't really, your skill wasn't all that it took to get that deer. That deer said he would give himself up to you. He sacrificed his own body so that you can have sustenance. People forget about that, you know, that they blame, or they claim they're great warriors and hunters, but half of that is Creator making that spirit and that animal come to you so you were able to get him. So we got to think about it that way.
I think that Peter had a question. Peter, did you have something that you wanted to ask? Is Peter still with us?
Yes.
We call them
Unmute.
Hey, Peter.
Hey, everybody. Lately, Myeengun, I've been looking at my life, where I used to be with my alcoholism and carrying on in crazy ways. And I feel like the Creator is not going to forgive me for all the things I did. And it makes me feel like the Creator doesn't always love me, but I know He does, because He gave me life, which is that really sacred gift of the Creator. And I just wanted to say thank you for all the Wampum Bell teachings and all your time and your patience with me and your kindness. Yeah. Miigwech.
Oh, miigwech.
That's it.
Good. Anyone else have any questions for
Josie, may I ask a question? May I ask?
Yes.
Okay. This is a question for non-Indigenous people, for the Canadians. I would like for anyone to comment. I'm open to whatever comments and suggestions you may have. it is said that when the new people come to Canada, they are known as the new Canadians. That's what they're that's what they're known as. That's what they're called, I guess, the new Canadians. As an Anishinaabe Kwe person, I'm so happy, and it gives my heart such joy, of course, that they come here and that they come to our lands and that they get to live among us. Of course, I'm so happy about that. What do non-Indigenous people think about that, and how do you feel about them being referred to as new Canadians? And it is said about I don't know if this is true or not. It is said about Canada that Canada is the second largest landmass in the world. Like, out of all the countries, we have a lot of land. So my thinking is, surely we have more than enough room in our hearts to welcome them. Would be, if I may, I'm not I'm Native, but if I may, I hope you don't mind my saying that. Thank you so much.
I didn't know that was Mim. I thought it was the.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
No.
I can speak for all Canadians, of course, just as you can't speak for all Indigenous people. But I would wholeheartedly agree with you that I would like to welcome people here. And I feel like it's really important for us, as I'm learning more from Myeengun and from other elders about these treaties that we're part of. And the treaties are not just made with, well, the Tura Wampum was made with the Dutch, but it really was meant to be for all people who would come, all newcomers that would come to the land. And so I feel like it's really important for us as new people come to this land to be sharing with them this history and these covenants, so that they understand that they are also a part of all these beautiful covenants and treaties. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but just one response from one Canadian. Yeah.
Hi, I wonder if people can hear me.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Maria, and I was born in Bolivia, in South America. And I came to Canada in 1987. It's been a long time. And I come from a country that is 80% Indigenous. So I was present during the Oka crisis in Montreal. I marched. And I remember that had such an impact on me that, it didn't, it wasn't in vain. And I consider myself a settler on Indigenous land, on treaty land. I consider myself a treaty person. I consider that recent newcomers to Canada need to learn about this history, because it's the only way that we can truly come to reconciliation. And on an individual, as an individual, I'm learning about the history. I have friends who have graciously and generously gifted me with a drum. I have graciously been invited to some ceremonies with grandmothers, and I have this deep compromise to be a treaty person and respect the treaties. My children were born here, and I feel that that's a blessing. They were born on Turtle Island, and I think we have a responsibility. those gifts that are given to us come with a responsibility. And the graciousness of Indigenous people, for me, is being responsible to this land, being responsible to those treaties, and teaching my children that we need to uphold those treaties. So I could go on and on. I've done workshops for newcomers on allyship, but it's really something very profound and intimate. I don't know if that answers your question, but there are a lot of people like me who were not born on this land, but who have children on Turtle Island. So we have a responsibility. That's it.
Maria, thank you for your words. They were beautiful. And thank you for your good work.
Josie, if I may, just one more thing.
Yes.
How they say, pardon me, how they express it, how it was told to me was Canada is the second largest landmass in the world. How do you, what exactly do they mean by that? How do you interpret that? How, my interpretation is, I'm so happy that they come to Canada. I'm so happy that, you know, that they come and we could make a better life for our children when they are the new Canadians come to Canada. And of course it's a blessing that they come, that they chose Canada. I'm so happy that they did. To describe Canada as that, what does that mean? Like, I'm not sure yet. I think we're after Russia. Like Canada has more land than Russia. I think, yeah. But I don't know the formula. I don't know the algorithm, if I may, whatever, how to, interpret it.
This is James. I could jump in on that one a little bit. I love geography. I'm an engineer. So Russia is the largest by square area. So if you measure it in square kilometers or square miles, Russia's the largest. It covers 11 time zones. Canada's the second largest by area. I guess, what do we have? 4 time zones. So it's just a different way to look at volume. But if you look at it another way and say, and you talked about Mother Earth and giving life, water is a big part of that. If you look at fresh water, we've got the largest amount of fresh water of any part of the world. But there's many ways of looking at richness geographically.
We will have done join with video.
Oh, friends, this has been such a rich evening. I feel like we probably need to shut down soon. I'm so grateful for this conversation, and I hope you will come back and join us. Our next session in the series, I believe, is October 20th. Did I write that down? And Janice Montour of the Six Nations Woodland Cultural Center will be speaking to us that evening. So I do hope you will join us. Several people have been asking about the video sharing, and that I believe Lisa shared with us that everybody that is registered will get a link emailed to them, but it's also will be on the MCEC webpage.
Will we open up here?
So
I just wanted to say thank you to Myeengun. I actually grew up south of London, and I went to Westminster Central. And I went to school with people from Chippewa, Munsee, and Oneida. So I was good friends with them. Some of them had your last name.
Number?
So I don't know if they're your relatives. And I've lost track with them, but because I was before Facebook and all that stuff, but someday I hope to connect with them. So I just wanted to say hello. I live near Kitchener now, but I grew up sort of near where your reserve is.
Great, thank you for that. Any last words as we say goodnight to each other?
Well, I just want to express my gratitude to the whole circle. This has been amazing. So
Yeah. Ditto. So good night all, with much gratitude for the wonderful conversation, and of course to Myeengun for your important role in this evening. Thank you. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
They never say his last name.
Join us again.
Maybe it's a First Nation name.